So Zdravo, Salvabona, and Annyeonghaseyo. Hey, it's time for Green Shorts. And today I'm going to show you how I turn these logs into mushroom growing machines. Actually, this is part 2 of this series. About a year ago, I inoculated these logs with Shiitake mushroom spore that I purchased from Fungi Perfecti. They've been sitting for a year, gathering moisture under this protective shade cloth here, and the mycelium have spent that time colonizing these logs. One way that you can tell when the logs are ready is by the mottling here on the end. The length of time that process takes varies depending on the type of mushroom that you're growing. And in this case, I've got oak logs and shiitake mushrooms, so the recommended window there is at least 9 months, but up to 12. Today I'm going to start the process of forcing mushrooms to grow out of these logs. The first step in doing that is to move them to a 50-gallon trash can. I started out with a little bit of water in this trash can, not all the way full, because these logs are going to want to float. As the logs get more buoyant, it gets a little more tricky. I'm prioritizing the larger logs to get in this batch, and then I'll fit the smaller ones in if I can. Okay, I can get this one to soak in a bucket by itself. Before I fill this the rest of the way with rainwater, I'm going to add some stones to the top to weigh it down. Alright, and now I'm going to top it off with some rainwater. This trash can was previously used as a rain barrel, so I've got an overflow spot here, so I can't get it any more full. And that just means that my little chunk here won't get wet. So I'll put this in the bucket with the small one. I'm going to go ahead and grab the last log and soak the whole batch. You want to cover the logs with water as much as possible, but 100% coverage is not necessary. But the more the better. And now I'm going to let this sit and soak for 24 hours. You can go as long as 36. Think about it this way. The log that's been colonized by the mycelium is like a battery that's not charged. Putting it in water for 24 hours is going to charge that battery, and then we can produce mushrooms. Okay, it's been a little longer than 24 hours. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and take these logs out of the water and set them in a place where they're shaded and protected from the rain. Interestingly, these logs are already starting to pin. You can see the beginnings of a mushroom poking through above the water line here. So these guys are ready to go. Got some pins on these too. Got a tarp overhead here, stacking the logs against this partially cut tree. Shiitakes could get about this big, so I want to make sure I've got enough space between my logs that the mushrooms aren't crushing into the next log. In the past, I've tried burying these into sand about up to here, but I find that it just makes things messy. If you have enough moisture in the logs already, they don't really need to be buried. Plus, then you'll get mushrooms in the lower sections as well. Inoculating this small little chunk of wood here was more of an experiment to see if I could get it to produce mushrooms, even as small as it is. I'm actually going to set this in this little plant tray and add a little bit of water. That'll help it hold on to its moisture a little bit longer. But as you can see, it's already pinning in several spots. Alright, I got the logs all set up. And now I'm going to wait about 2 to 3 to 4 days for the mushrooms to appear. This rainwater can be used again, but it will grow mosquitoes. So I'm going to cover up these bins. Let's check on progress on our mushrooms. Okay, this is 2 days out. See, those pins are starting to form into mushrooms. Even a little chunk of wood is growing some shiitakes. This is day 3. Here's day 4. If you let the mushrooms go too long, which I did, they run out of moisture and will begin to shrink. You can also see that a few of these have been munched on by some critters as well, so a chicken wire enclosure around my mushroom logs might be beneficial. You saw how good these looked just a few days ago. These have probably been on here about 3 or 4 days too long. And I do think I probably would have benefited from putting the logs into some damp sand so that the moisture in the logs could have been conserved and more of that gone into forcing the mushrooms. But all is not lost here. Even though these have dried, they can be rehydrated. And actually, some people will do that with white wine, which just adds to the flavor. So in the state like this, they're not the beautiful, wide shiitake mushrooms that I'm used to getting, but these could still be used for a soup ingredient after they've been rehydrated. Another critter you should be on the lookout for when you're growing mushrooms is slugs. You can see how a slug has made his way around here and probably eaten most of these 2, 3 mushrooms right here. One thing I am noticing is some foreign fungi here. In other words, stuff I don't want growing on these logs. So I'm going to carefully scrape that off to discourage it. I don't want to damage the bark because that is protecting the interior of the log here. But I do want to minimize whatever this is so it doesn't steal nutrients from the mushrooms that I do want to be growing out of these logs. I'm going to stack the logs back in a rick and put them where they can be getting rain so that moisture can help the logs as they rest and recharge. Something else to watch out for is termites. When these things are sitting on the ground with moisture in them, termites can find them too. Another good reason to have these in some sand. Do as I say, not as I do. So here's my take, and the good news is I didn't just wait a whole year to do this once. If I manage these inoculated logs correctly, they will last a year for every inch in diameter. And so they will continue to produce mushrooms. This one, since it's about 6 to 7 inches in diameter, I get 7 years technically out of this log to make mushrooms. And I can do that about twice a month. So I'm going to let these rest for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to start the process of flushing again. And hopefully the logs that didn't produce as well as the others will continue to colonize, and hopefully my production will even out in all of these logs. Of course, the thicker logs are going to produce longer than the smaller ones, just by nature of the energy that they contain. Of course, the next go round, I'll do a better job of managing moisture and not wait too long to harvest these mushrooms. So hopefully I can catch them while they're at their peak. I started out with shiitakes because they are an easy mushroom to grow, and I got my mushroom spore from Fungi Perfecti, and I'll put a link to them in the description below. Not a sponsor, but they're definitely one of the authorities on growing mushrooms. And it certainly is gratifying. It's fun to see these trees turning into food. If you're just catching this video, this is part 2, and I will also link part 1 in the description below and the card right here if you'd like to see the process of getting these logs set up to grow mushrooms before I had to wait and let them colonize. Thank you so much to my patrons and members for helping make these videos possible. If you'd like to join me on Patreon or in the membership area here on YouTube for extra content, you can check out the links in the description below. As always, my mission is to help you see green so you can be green, and save a little green by doing it yourself. And growing mushrooms yourself will actually save you some serious green. If you've bought organically raised mushrooms lately, some serious coin right there. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next Saturday.